you decide to change your life. Maybe it starts with a small realization. Something inside you tells you that you want more from yourself. You want to grow. You want to think better, live better, and become stronger emotionally and mentally. So you start working on yourself. You read, you reflect, you set goals, you try to build new habits, and at first, it feels exciting. But then, something unexpected happens. You begin feeling lonely in a way you didn't before. Self-improvement is often portrayed as a journey of empowerment, but few people talk about the emotional isolation that sometimes accompanies it. When you start prioritizing growth, your interests may change. Your conversations may change. Your tolerance for certain behaviors may decrease. And slowly, the circle of people you feel comfortable with may shrink. Not because you dislike others, but because your perspective is evolving. Is it possible that growth naturally filters connections? You might notice that topics you used to enjoy talking about no longer feel meaningful. Gossip may feel draining. Repetitive complaints without action may feel frustrating. Superficial conversations may feel empty. You start craving depth, purpose, and clarity. But depth is not always common in everyday social environments. And when your internal world becomes more complex, simple conversations can feel less satisfying. What if growth makes you harder to entertain, but easier to understand yourself? Another source of loneliness comes from changing behavior patterns. When you start setting boundaries, some people may react differently to you. They might call you distant. They may misunderstand your intentions. Some may even feel uncomfortable, because your growth forces them to reflect on their own choices. This is not necessarily hostility. It is often a natural response to change in social dynamics. But emotionally, it can feel like distance. Does becoming better sometimes make old comfort zones disappear? Self-improvement also requires time spent in solitude. Learning, reflection, planning, and emotional processing often happen when you are alone. While society celebrates social success, personal growth frequently happens in quiet environments. You read alone, you think alone, you analyze your mistakes alone. And although this solitude is productive, it can sometimes feel heavy, because humans are naturally social creatures. How do you balance growth and human connection? There is also the comparison pressure that often appears during self-improvement. As you become more aware, you may start noticing your flaws more clearly. You see what you want to change. You become aware of how far you feel from your ideal self. Awareness is powerful, but it can also amplify self-criticism if not handled gently. Because growth is not linear, and improvement is not instant. What if you are judging your current self by the standards of your future self? Sometimes the loneliness of self-improvement comes from losing old versions of yourself. When you change, you are not only leaving certain habits behind, you are also leaving familiar emotional patterns. The version of you that enjoyed certain things may no longer exist. And even if the new version is better aligned with your goals, there can be grief associated with letting go of the past self. Is growth sometimes a quiet form of emotional mourning? Another important truth is that self-improvement can create intellectual or emotional distance from people who are not on the same path. This does not mean you are better than others. It simply means priorities and perspectives may have shifted. But humans have a deep need for belonging. When belonging becomes less certain, loneliness can appear even when you are progressing in life. Can progress coexist with emotional connection? You may also experience what is sometimes called growth discomfort. As you develop better habits, your old comfort zones may feel tempting. The journey of improvement is not always motivating. Some days it feels disciplined, some days it feels forced, and some days it feels lonely because the transformation is not yet visible, but the old lifestyle is no longer satisfying. What if self-improvement is not always supposed to feel happy? People often assume that improving yourself will automatically attract better relationships. While growth can increase the quality of connections you attract, it does not guarantee immediate social fulfillment. Sometimes, the process of becoming a better version of yourself temporarily reduces the number of people you feel aligned with. Quality often replaces quantity. But the transition period can feel emotionally empty. Is loneliness sometimes the price of alignment? There is a psychological paradox in self-improvement. You are becoming stronger, more aware, and more capable. But at the same time, you may feel more isolated because you are no longer emotionally merging with environments that do not support your development. Growth requires selective engagement, and selection naturally reduces randomness in social interactions. It is important to understand that the loneliness of self-improvement is not necessarily negative. It is often a transitional state rather than a permanent condition. Many people experience this phase when they start prioritizing meaning over comfort, depth over distraction, and long-term growth over short-term validation. If you are walking this path, you may sometimes wonder whether it is worth it. Because improvement can feel like walking away from familiarity without immediately arriving at a new emotional home. But growth is not about instant emotional reward. It is about building a life that aligns with your values and your future self. You are allowed to miss your old comfort zones. You are allowed to feel lonely sometimes during transformation. You are allowed to question the process. These feelings do not mean you are moving in the wrong direction. Because the loneliness of self-improvement is not the loneliness of failure. It is the loneliness of change. And change often walks slowly, quietly, and without applause. But one day, you may look back and realize that the loneliness you once feared was actually the space where you were becoming who you were meant to be. So if you feel alone on your self-improvement journey, remember this: you are not losing people, you are finding yourself. And sometimes, finding yourself requires walking a path that not everyone can follow. Like, subscribe, and join our journey into timeless depth. Share your thoughts below.